Good morning, good afternoon, or should I say good evening. Welcome to another edition of the e-commerce report with me, Mia Lindicke, and locate to you CEO Steve Orenstein. Welcome, Steve.
Hi Mia, good to be back here.
Yes, Steve, I read a very interesting article the other day. The CEO of Domino's Pizza, Don Mage, and I read that he actually started his career as a delivery driver at the very same company which he works at now, at top executive. In 1987, he started off as a delivery driver. And it just made me think of what a beautiful example of starting really as humble beginnings. It also made me think a little bit about another example. I think it is Jeff Bezos, the founder and CEO of Amazon. He also spent his teenage days, holidays, flipping burgers at McDonald's. And it made me think that these top executives they had to start somewhere. And I think you know where this is going. I want to know from you, where did it all start for you, Steve?
Actually, funny enough, my first job, I think I was probably like 12 or 13, maybe a little bit older. I was delivering newspapers in the local area. In the days when I guess newspapers were actually printed a lot more than what they are today, and I was delivering. It must have been about 200 newspapers to all the neighbours in the area, and making sure that had to be done on a weekly basis. And if you missed someone's home that read that newspaper, they would complain. So it was definitely it was good. It was I guess I started as a delivery driver back in the days, but doing that on foot.
Sure. And then how did that ended up, in where you are now with a successful company like Zoom to You? Did that later on translate into where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was never really planned out in building the Zoom to You business. I'd always sort of gone into technology and running different sort of technology businesses or building technology products. And then I'd just gone through the process of selling a company, and I left that business, and I was trying to figure out, what next I was going to do. And actually experiencing all these e-commerce deliveries arriving to my apartment, and never knowing when the driver was actually arriving. And it was on that sort of, the driver tried to deliver some furniture to me. It was like the fourth or fifth attempt. I had no idea that he was trying to get there. And the driver was super annoyed. He left me this really angry voicemail the one day. And I remember thinking, like, it's a bad experience for the driver, but it was also a bad experience for the consumer. And technology could connect the two parties together. So I actually knew when the driver was arriving, and using that technology to provide a better experience to the consumer, but also to the driver. And so that was the starting to thinking of the idea, and ultimately led to building a platform that's now Zoom to You, and testing that and sort of figuring out, is there demand for this product? And in the early days was building a very, very basic and simple system. And I spent a lot of time for those first few months in the car. We would get, those one or two orders that would come through on a daily basis, and, delivering, 5 orders is actually much, much harder than delivering 500, because they could be all over the area that we're in. And so, yeah, it was definitely interesting times, but you learned a lot around the business. You learn a lot around what it's like to be a driver, and making sure the technology was there to really help drivers be able to deliver efficiently.
Sure. I want to dive into our first story for today, and that is the one of Walmart. They're planning to modernize their business. And just talking about humble beginnings, Walmart CEO Doe McMillan, he actually started off his career at Walmart unloading trucks. Can you imagine? As a teen, and now he's the CEO of this mega retailer, and he earns more than $25 million a year. His aim is now to modernize the company. And this week, Walmart announced one of their strategies is to offer drone delivery services up to 6 miles in Dallas. So I want to give you some information, and I want to hear your opinion. The service will be accessible from 10 o'clock, 10:30 in the morning to 6 6:30 in the afternoon every day, but except for Wednesdays. And the deliveries will be completed under 30 minutes. Okay, that's great. But my question is, Steve, why these specific times? Is it to make it easier for them to deliver, or is it because it's a peak demand? What is the reason for that?
Yeah, I mean, I suspect the timing's probably been built around some peak times inside of their business, or maybe it's, they're not wanting to operate inside of their peak time periods. So when they've got staff available, I suspect there's obviously some areas around maintenance of the drones. Maybe that's why they've got the middle of the week, sort of the Wednesday, for them to sort of, if there's any maintenance to be done, they can do that. There's probably a period of recharging the drones as well. But yeah, look, I think it's, Walmart doing this shows that they're looking at ways of being able to innovate inside of their business. And it's always very challenging for large organizations to be doing things that are, pushing the boundaries and innovating. And so it's good to see that, a company of this size is actually looking at improving their customers' experience and using technology to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that is my next question. It's a large retail, and what do they do from a logistical point of view if they've got this overwhelming demand for last mile delivery with a drone within that 60 miles region? What do they do to make sure that they don't, that they can deliver on something that they've set up to do?
Yeah, look, I mean, hopefully they've got the technology architecture in place that's going to allow them to make sure the customers have a great experience. And so whenever you're thinking about last mile delivery, there's always a capacity of the numbers of deliveries that you can do inside of a particular period. And you'd ideally want to have, time windows where you say, in this time window, in this area, the maximum capacity of deliveries is going to be X. Hopefully they've thought about that, and I'm sure they have, that they would say they're going to limit and cap the number of deliveries that they can do over a particular period so that they don't sort of have these huge spikes in demand. Walmart's probably an easier business to be able to do this in. If you're thinking about sort of the food delivery of restaurants, it's much, much harder because everyone wants to eat lunch at the same time. Everyone wants to eat dinner at the same time. And so you have this enormous spikes of demand during those time periods. It's going to be much more challenging for restaurants to be able to do this. But in Walmart's instance, it's groceries, it's other consumables. It's probably going to be much easier to be able to control that demand quite nicely and have that sort of going throughout the day. I mean, they'll still have peak periods, but they can control that, by having the right systems in place.
Yeah. It takes us to our second story. It's the Australia Post. They've reported a 200 million annual loss. It's first since 2015. I don't think this comes as any big shocker, Steve. Australia Post, they have been implementing several strategies to get ahead of this high interest rate curve. Specifically, their letter losses increased by over 50% in this financial year to $384 million. Now, few people are obviously sending letters. It is 2023 after all, but this is now a massive loss to the company. I've also read that it's mostly just government officials still sending letters. Australian family will receive on minimum or maximum, actually, should I rather say, one letter per week. So is it time for them to change completely the strategy? Is it worth it, looking at what they've now announced, to send out those letters every second day? Should they not get rid of it completely? Is that possible?
Yeah, look, I mean, Paul Graham, the CEO, has come in there and he's probably been in that role for, I think, just over a year now. And I think it's a really challenging job that he's got there. I think if he was in control of that company, he would be making a whole bunch of different changes. But ultimately, he reports back to the government, and the government is probably going to be quite conservative in rushing into making any changes. And I think you can see in a lot of the wording and the presentations that they've been giving and the press sort of briefings that are coming out, they're really pushing hard around this letter side of things because it's costing their business an enormous amount of money. This business has evolved. Like, it was originally built to deliver mail. Mail, is dropped off dramatically. And so now you've got all these post offices, and they don't need these post offices anymore because, it's delivering of parcels. It can be all done from centralized warehouses and be a lot more efficient than running it through your local post office. And so I think, Paul Graham needs the ability to be able to look at the entire setup and go, actually, we're going to change all of this, and this is how we're going to actually rebuild this business and rebuild it into a profitable business. There's no reason why Australia Post couldn't be a profitable business, but I just don't think they've got the capacity and ability to make those changes, and it's going to require the government to give them the green light to do that. It doesn't make sense that mail today is still being delivered every day of the week. No one needs that to be done. Maybe there's certain areas, but really, most people should be switching to electronic. It's way better for the environment. You don't need that piece of paper delivered unless it's like certain areas where people don't have computers. But now, with things like Starlink, where everyone can get access to internet, maybe there's an older generation that may not have that capacity to be able to do that. Maybe in those instances you're delivering, but it's definitely got to be a slower time period because it just doesn't make sense, and it's impacting the environment. The amount of extra deliveries that are happening and the drivers are actually doing these is definitely, there's a cost to the environment for doing that. So there's change that needs to happen, and the government's got to let them to be able to do that.
Absolutely, the political will as well. But
Right.
so, if it's possible, I mean, the CEO said yesterday that they need to urgently modernize the system. Now, is that possible with the limited time that you have? How urgently can you modernize an entire system that's been there for years?
Yeah. I mean, I think straight away what you could be doing is you could be saying, instead of delivering every single day, we're going to deliver every second day. That would be the first step. And that would be the change in sort of getting people used to the idea. Eventually you'd get down to, okay, well, now we're going to change it to once a week. And then, gradually sort of reduce, and remove the ability for mail to actually be delivered. There's no reason why mail should actually be delivered. Everyone's got email, or majority of people does. And, as time goes on over the next 10 years, everyone will have email. So it's going to be challenging. I think there's some legacy things inside of the Australia Post business that make it challenging. You've got these licensed post offices where they've got a license to be able to do distribution. And so suddenly you've got too many of these post offices. And now what do they do? How do they compensate those people who have bought into those licenses to be able to run in those different areas? So it's going to be complicated and difficult for the government to be able to navigate this. So I think it's going to be challenging, and Paul Graham definitely has some challenges on his hands, and to be able to make these improvements to really, turn the business into being a profitable business, because otherwise it's costing the Australian taxpayers money.
Yeah. So it takes us to our third story. It's the greatest challenge, I think, of this century, actually, is to modernize these old models in companies. Now, we've seen now with what's happening at the Australia Post, they failed to stay ahead of this modernizing curve, and they're now just playing catch up. Another public listed company, for example, is Booktopia. I've listened in this week to their full year report. They also made another loss of $29 million this year. So the question here is, because Booktopia also said that they're still stuck more or less at what happened during COVID. It's been the first full year after
Right.
COVID-19 lockdowns. So do you think that there are a lot of companies stuck in this model now, trying to find their feet again, adjusting to basically what they were implementing in 2019 before the pandemic? Is that very hard from a business perspective?
Yeah, I think, if you look at any large organization, innovation is really challenging for large organizations. If you're an employee inside of that business, you're not going to get rewarded for taking risks and making changes inside of a business. You get rewarded for doing the same thing and doing that consistently. And so these larger businesses need to think about ways of how they can reward their team members to be able to be taking risks and to be thinking about doing things differently. And sometimes, taking those risks means that things won't work and go to plan, and you'll cop some flack for being able to do that. And so companies of this scale have got to be okay with being able to do that. And I think that's very challenging. And so this is why you see large organizations get to a certain scale, they survive for that period of time, and then large companies actually, can actually go bankrupt. You've seen it with, the Kodak story is the obvious one where, they didn't innovate. Everyone was using cameras and they were printing film, and that was, great. And then suddenly the digital camera came along, and they hadn't spent enough time in R&D and research and thinking and looking towards the future. And I think I see this time and time again with large organizations. And I think over the next 10 years, there's going to be, a significant shift in businesses, particularly as we see AI being used, and AI changing the way in which businesses can actually operate. And there's a lot of businesses today that don't even understand what AI can do and the impacts that AI can actually have to their business. And so the companies that do are now sort of actively looking at and implementing AI. They're the businesses that are going to really grow over the next sort of 5 to 10 years as they implement this sort of technology.
Yeah. And while we talk about, implementing these strategies like AI and all of that, we see a lot of CEOs retiring and making way for new blood to take over. So my question is, new CEOs, a little bit younger generation, but how important is it to have the vision as a CEO, but also the buy-in throughout the entire company, to make sure that you go to war with a team and you don't head into this alone? Is that important, to have an entire structure supporting you as a CEO if you've got this vision of artificial intelligence?
Yeah, definitely. I think you need that support from the board all the way down. And so I think it's having the right structure inside of your board that really understands where the business is heading and what the future is looking like. And then it comes down to your executive level and being able to communicate to your team to say, hey, this is where we're going and this is why we're going down this particular path. I think that's definitely very, very important.
Yeah. So the fourth story that we're going to is, it's being reported that delivery drivers are not using their real identities. Now, I've seen those TikTok videos. Business Insiders reporting actually that the customers are posting these videos on social media, and they are concerned about their safety, because the delivery drivers will, for instance, create a profile. Let's say you are expecting Steve to pitch up at your house to deliver parcel, and meantime Mia is there. So this is obviously concerning to the customers because they are worried about their safety, and just the integrity of the company. So my question to you, Steve, how important is it for a company to keep that business to customer trust, and to make sure that whoever you then contract to do your deliveries, that they are also, they are on the same page, and they don't misuse that trust?
Yeah, look, I think this is something that's probably happened for a long time, and it's not just related to delivery drivers. I think you've seen this in instance with taxi drivers where they're sharing of taxi plate licenses and those types of things as well. And it's definitely a problem, and something that I think technology is going to solve. I think what you will find in the future is that AI, and this is available today, the driver registers and goes through an onboarding process. They capture a photograph of that driver. Every time they log into their account, it says, show me a picture of who you are. And it actually recognizes that they're actually the person. Now, you're still going to have ways of being able to get around that. They might get them to do that at the beginning of their shift or the beginning of their logging onto the app, and then they hand over the device to someone else. But they're going to get smarter in figuring out these types of things as to what's happening there. So I think it's just companies are going to have to think about technologies, how to solve these particular types of security problems. When you build these businesses, you often don't think about how someone's going to use it in a fraudulent way. And then suddenly you have some sort of fraud that is actually occurring. And, that then comes down to the technical teams to go, okay, well, how best do we solve this particular problem? And often it's using technology to be able to solve it.
Tell me just quickly, I mean, you're the experienced person here when it comes to the vetting process of the delivery drivers. You've obviously read a lot about this. Is there any criminal clearance certificate that they have to submit? How does it work?
Yeah, I mean, I think in most instances, most companies will request like a police check from those drivers, which is, one level of doing that check. And I think that's definitely something that's worthwhile doing. But, a criminal activity can happen at any point in time, and you've got to be regularly checking these things. And, more often than not, you won't actually know, if that person has had a clear one and, a week later they've done something, you won't actually know until later. So I think it's where we found what's really important is capturing live reviews from customers, live reviews, and actually looking at when you get negative reviews and figuring out, well, why did that customer give a negative review, and doing a little bit of investigation into that to understand what's actually occurred. And that can actually be the best way of being able to solve the problem, because you understand in real time what's actually going on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the last story that I want to do is the Dollar General store. They're actually battling with clear their extra stock. It's now actually to a point where it's blocking their store routes, the aisles. It's just a complete mess. Now the story is very important because they have over 18,000 of these stores, these Dollar General stores in the
Yeah,
US and in
yeah.
Mexico, and it's now on this mission to just get rid of these stocks. So they're actually selling it at a huge discount. But interesting is that they're also now getting a team, an external team on board to come and clean up, to organize these stores, because they are just battling with all of these stock not in the right place. So, I mean, is this a common problem that we find, in store management and these stores where they're virtual stores, I should rather say, waiting for delivery through an e-commerce?
Yeah, look, it's a very interesting story. I mean, Dollar General is a $30 billion company in the US. So it's a substantial company, and to be seeing that they're having these types of problems is it's quite surprising. I mean, every large big business like this would be running an inventory management system. They would be understanding stock levels, and they would be meeting, the demand of customers' orders, to be matching what that looks like. And then, they'd be having lots of data to be able to tell them what order volume looks like. I mean, just yesterday, Dollar General made an announcement to the market, and the stock tumbled 14%, which is interesting. And basically, it came down to their net income, so their profit inside of their business had reduced. Their net income was 468 million, down from 678 million from the prior corresponding period. Yet their sales actually rose to 9.8 billion from 9.4 billion from the previous year. So the business is actually growing. Their costs have actually increased, which is why they've actually not made as much profit, which may be related to this inventory problem that they're seeing. It's very strange. Systems and process in any business is what makes a successful business, and having the right tools in place to know, when deliveries are going in and out, or how much stock you actually need, and looking at that data to be able to figure that out can make or break a business. And something, has gone wrong inside of this business. They're obviously addressing it, and they're probably throwing a bit of money to try and solve this very quickly.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Steve. That's it from our side. We do have a question for today, and we want you to send in those questions to us, and Steve will answer those questions every week on this e-commerce report. The one that we have today is from Jerome. First of all, he says, "Hi, Steve and Mia. I turned into your live stream again, and it's really like the topics you guys are discussing." Thank you so much, Jerome. We really appreciate it. You guys mentioned about working remotely since the pandemic. Is that something that you are implementing in your business until now?
Yeah, so I mean, in our business, even pre-pandemic, we've got a large team that works remotely, as well as in our office. We used to have an office actually in the Philippines. We have an office in Sydney in Australia. But yeah, most of our team today works remotely, and we find it works really well inside of our business. There's sometimes definitely important to get together with a team, and that means that I spend a bit of time flying across different parts of the world and meeting with the team. But ultimately, yeah, we're a remote company, and it works really well. It means that we can find the best people, and it doesn't matter where they actually are across the world. And I think this is the nature of the future. And there's a lot of talk around companies forcing people back into the office, and I think that's for a lot of these legacy organizations that don't motivate their staff, or don't have the ability to motivate their staff to do the right work when they've been able to work remotely. And so it's interesting.
Thank you so much, Steve. I hope that answers your question. There is a huge debate currently about remote working, and I know that Amazon CEO also reportedly made some remarks in terms of calling all their remote workers back to the office. But it's a conversation that's been going back and forth, and I think, like you've said, what works for your company is the best,
That's
right?
right. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. That is a wrap of the e-commerce report. Thank you so much, Steve. It's really lovely to chat about these developments in the e-commerce business sector. We'll do that again next time, next week, same time.
Perfect. Thanks, Mia. Great to chat.